Well, good evening, everyone. There are no biblical slides from me this evening, but I have to do some old-fashioned notes here. Thank you, Eddie, for inviting me this evening as well. Very kind of you. So, Tokeny created and powered the ERC-3643 standard. For those that are unfamiliar with the 3643 standard, it enforces compliance through embedded transfer rules and eligibility rules that are set within the investor identity verification system. It was a very simple vision from the business in the sense that they wanted to create a standard to drive adoption. Because where we sit here today, we are still very much in siloed adoption. And without greater adoption, we won't get any liquidity, we won't get collateralization, and we won't get the likes of secondary markets that everybody's seeking. So what has happened is that we pioneered the token standard. It took us 3 years to go through that process. It received its final status last year. It also means that we had to open source it. The foundation currently sits with over 75 members, of which Tokeny is a member. And that obviously includes silent data as well for a lot of the work that they have been doing. And a number of large financial institutions, including now Invesco, Apex, and a number of others to mention. Whilst this is really a very huge step in the right direction, the market still operates very much in silos. And unless we actually work to a unified standard, we will continue to do so. And unfortunately, with blockchain being the shiny penny it was for many years, many people are insistent on creating their own standards. I think that when you have an open source standard that can be utilized, standards should be used, that we should all actually use the functionality from which. And I think that we can learn from lessons in the past as we sit here today with regards to some of the financial instruments that have, you look at the taxonomy for these instruments that run in the thousands of these term sheets that go through banks on a daily basis. And the machine readable, of course, it has increased human capital costs in order to be able to facilitate those reports. So to become a token standard with Ethereum, as I said, we needed to relinquish all ownership and make it open source to our clients. And we felt that this was for the greater good. But in doing so, our vision firmly remains the same, is that we need a standard to drive greater adoption. And that can only be best for all of us here today, markets of financial institutions that are looking to get into blockchain if they haven't already done so. So to close off on ERC-3643, and it was recently cited, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, as they recognize it as their standard, which is a step in the right direction. So in terms of Tokeny, having pioneered the ERC-3643 token, it very much sits at the heart of our tech platform. It created a investor, platforms, bank managers, issues, and distributes, and a white label marketplace for investors. We also actually put a SaaS price tag on it as well, because in the past, and this was a pricing change that we changed recently, we felt that there shouldn't be a barrier to entry, especially from a pricing perspective. So what we want to do is create further adoption by making that barrier of entry less. So the one thing that we do firmly believe is that tokenization really is the tip of the iceberg when it comes to digital whales, and there are far broader benefits. And therefore, Tokeny actually works with a lot of financial institutions on innovation and being able to look at specific pain points that they're currently experiencing. Some of which I will go through. I will mention some of the projects that we're currently working on at the moment, but unfortunately I won't be able to name the institutions given the fact that we're under NDA. But to give you an idea of where we've come from say a year ago when it was predominantly POCs, we're now working on bond issuances with ICMA bond on their taxonomy, which is working with a UK bank. We're working on a money market fund again with a UK bank. We're also working on an onboarding solution by mutualizing your on-chain ID solution, which is looking at mutualizing KYC claims and proofs anonymously across multiple jurisdictions. And we're doing capital calls with a asset servicing client. We're also looking at leverage emails with a leading UK bank. And of course, we're looking at UCITS fund services, funds issuance with a leading asset manager using equity EWPG framework. So I think it's fair to say that we've come on leaps and bounds. There's still an awful lot to go. But going back to my original statement, we need to be looking at more standardization in order to be able to drive retro adoption. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Adrian. So, I wanted to go a little bit deeper into ERC-3643, not too deep, but to give a bit of background on what it is, and also some of the work that we've done with ERC-3643 and silent data. This is Adrian. Why do we need a standard for securities? I think, like Adrian said it there, but there's a problem with lack of portability of tokens and security tokens. If everyone's using a different standard, it's a bit like everyone using a different plug socket, right? But you want to be able to take your appliance and plug it in from from Bristol to London and not be worried about a different plug socket. This is the same with exchanges. Essentially, I want to be able to take my token and trade it on one exchange and then trade it on another exchange. So what is ERC-3643? I think it's been covered. So it's a token for security. It's a standard for token security. It's a compliance-led approach. It comes from a foundation. It's primarily an open source standard. And what it enables is really security swaps, composability, all of the nice things that you get from the DeFi world, essentially, all of this rails for security tokens. So we can do conditional multi-party trading, loans, all of these very complex things we can do actually with smart contracts because of we have that standard rails to move tokens. And we get instant settlement as well through the blockchain. Where do we see the gaps, right? So the gaps we see are really in privacy, right? And this is why we think silent data was this is why we're interested in bringing silent data across to ERC-3643 and applying it on the silent data platform. So if you want private identity on chain, then that's something that you can do in silent data, and that's a requirement for some use cases. Privacy of balances. So if we've got a token security, but we don't have private balances, this is limiting in some use cases where, if you imagine an asset manager putting all of their funds on chain, they're going to want privacy. And then connections to off-chain data providers, right? So whilst we can have on-chain things like, okay, these parties have been through KYC, most KYC providers, if we think about Moody's, a lot of the traditional players, they're not on-chain. So bringing those parties into the on-chain world. So this is what we've done with silent data. So we filled what we see as the privacy gaps and applied it as part of the standard. So we have confidentiality for accounts, balances, transactions as part of the platform. We have controlled sharing of self-sovereign identity, and we have support for every single provider of KYC, AML, anyone with a traditional API, we can pull into the blockchain in a provable way. And so this is really what we brought to the standard. I'm not going to go in super deep today, but if you are interested to understand more, I did a webinar with Dennis O'Connell, who's the president of the ERC-3643 Foundation, or come and grab me afterwards and go through what we did in a bit more detail. But really, we're happy to be a member of the foundation. We think it's a really interesting standard. If you're looking to tokenize securities, but also things like loyalty points, anything else, I think you should check out the standard.